the chair for the Cardinal Dery Foundation, a foundation dedicated to immortalizing the works of the servants of God. And we do this mainly by giving financially and also with our time towards helping communities in various ways, as well as advancing the cause for his beatification. We at the Cardinal Dery Foundation recognize that the number of people who knew him personally are gradually, sadly, becoming extinct. That is why the board organizes these remembrance talks from time to time. However, this is the very first time that we are doing it online to enable more people to participate. And I'm happy that with all of us present here, we will participate effectively so that we can get these recordings and we can play it back later. So these virtual talks will not only enable a greater participation, but it will also facilitate the live recordings of the testimonies that we are about to hear for those who cannot sign up. And even those who cannot sign up can play it back later. So therefore, your active participation is critical to capture and immortalize his works. After the panel discussion, which is going to be in the form of guided questions, you all will have an opportunity to share your personal stories during the open forum, or you can actually type them in your chat box. So without further delay, let me introduce to you the key stars for tonight. Our moderator is no other than our very own Sir Edward Aloysius Fra. He's a Knight of St. Gregory. He's a management consultant with expertise in leadership development, has a BSc in agric economics, an MSc in wood technology and industrial management. He's married to Teresa, number one. He's been married for 44 years, and he has grown-up children, 4 grown-up daughters. His involvement in the church activities include he's been the past president for International Council of Catholic Men, Unum Omnis, Rome. He has been the former management standards assessor of Caritas Internationalis. He was the chairman of the board of St. Mary's Minor Seminary, Takoradi. He was a past chairman of the board, Marshallland and Development Services, Maridus. He is a past Supreme Knight of the Noble Order of the Knights of Marshals. Past member of the Diocesan Educational Committee, Secondary Takoradi Diocese. Past president of St. Vincent de Paul Society. And member of the Knighthood of the St. Gregory, conferred by Pope Francis. He is a parishioner of Star of the Sea Catholic Church. So, Sir Edward, please give us a wave. Now, we have 4 panelists. The first is Very Reverend Father Paul Beche. Father Paul Beche, please give us a wave. Where are you? Okay, we'll get to see him soon. But Father Paul Beche is the parish priest of St. George's Parish, Pina, which is the home parish of the servant of God. Before, he was a lecturer and formator at St. Victor's Major Seminary, Tamale, from 1991 to 2006, and subsequently registrar and lecturer at the Pastoral and Social Institute, WA, from 2006 to 2016. He retired from the classroom in 2016, and after a year sabbatical in the USA, he was appointed parish priest of St. George's Parish from 2017. And this is where he is right now, and is enjoying his pastoral ministry there, and he's been enjoying it till date. Our second panelist is Mrs. Philomena Kumsin. Mrs. Kumsin attended Holy Child School and the University of Cape Coast. She's a graduate teacher by profession and a homemaker by vocation, and has built a solid home for her family in Ghana, Tunisia, South Africa, and Kenya. While in Tunisia, she also taught at the American Cooperative School of Tunisia. Philomena has served her church well. She was an executive member of the Pax Romana, International Movement for Catholic Students, in 1984 to 1986, and she served in the African Coordination Team from 1986 to 1990. She has 6 children in all, including 5 boys and 1 lady. Our panelist number 3 is Her Ladyship, Mrs. Angelina Mona Domachare. She attended St. Francis of Assisi Girls Senior High School, Jirapa, and St. Louis Girls Secondary School, my school, Kumasi. She obtained her Bachelor at Law LLB degree from University of Ghana, her Barrister at Law BL certificate from Ghana Law School, and her Masters of Law LLM degree from Harvard University Law School, Massachusetts, in the USA. She worked at the Volta River Authority and rose to the level of Director, Legal Services, and was elevated as a Justice of the Court of Appeal in January 2015. She retired in April 2023. She's a practicing and dedicated Catholic, married with 5 children, including a set of twins. Then our final panelist is Mr. John Kofitando. He holds a Master's of Science degree in Industrial Chemistry, KNUST, and Executive Master's MBA in Entrepreneurial Management, University of Ghana, Legon, Ghana. He has had 22 years industry experience in production management, having worked in various capacities at Kumasi Brewery Limited, Ghana Breweries Limited, and Guinness Ghana Breweries Limited. He has been actively involved in various pastoral activities in the church since 1979. For a long period, he served as a coordinator of the Kumasi Diocesan Youth Council. He was the National Secretary of the International Movement for Catholic Students, Pax Romana, and later the National Treasurer of the Ghana National Catholic Youth Council, GANSIC. He is one of the core facilitators of the Biblical Apostolate and also the Marriage and Family Life Ministry at the Archdiocesan Pastoral Center. In recent times, he has developed a lay leadership program and runs workshops for newly elected parish councillors. He's a part-time lecturer in Biblical Apostolate at the St. Gregory Provincial Seminary at Pakusu, Kumasi, and serves as an advocate on the Metropolitan Tribunal of Kumasi. He's married with 5 daughters, and just last week he celebrated his 37th wedding anniversary. Ladies and gentlemen, your moderator and panelists. Over to you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you. So you may unmute yourself and speak when you're asked to, please.
Okay. So thank you very much, Teresa, and Chair of the Cardinal Dery Foundation. And thank you all who have linked up to share with us memories of our dear father, Cardinal Dery. This evening, we remember a great yet humble man who in his life was a spiritual guide, a pillar of strength, a source of comfort and wisdom for many. Many of us call him Daddy because that was indeed what he was to us. A great pastor and a mentor. He lived a life of love for all who came into contact with him because of his deep respect for their dignity as human beings. I'm referring to the servant of God, Peter Cardinal Dery, Emeritus Archbishop of Tamale. He lived for 90 years on this earth from 10th May 1918 to 6th of May 2008. So as we remember him today, we also celebrate the 16th year of his passing to glory. He lived almost all of his life, adult life, as a priest, a bishop of Wa from 1960 to 1970. And cardinal from 2006 to 2008, devoting almost all his life to the development of people. Remembering someone like Cardinal Dery, please, I'm having a little, can you hear me still?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Yes, we can hear
someone
you.
like
Loud and clear, loud and clear.
We can all hear you.
goodness.
Just that the screen dropped, or is it only mine?
Remembering someone, am I okay? Remembering someone of the past, I'll have to use my phone now because I got disconnected from this thing. Remembering someone of the past is fundamental to being human. Now, this is especially so when it is not about an imaginary person, but someone who has touched life, somebody we spoke with and ate with, and indeed even prayed with. It is natural to think and talk about the experiences shared with a person. It gives a sense of continuity through time, acknowledging the significant positive, goodness. Significant positive impact the person made on one's life. As we remember him today, we cannot but be grateful for his unwavering spiritual guidance and fatherly support. We still remember him as the main influencer to our formation as young people, providing us with opportunities that fostered positive relationships and contributed in no small way to our successful transition from youth to adulthood. This evening, the discussion panel, as we have already heard, we'll hear from them on some insights into his early life and personal growth. We will hear about the leadership qualities that made him a role model and a source of inspiration to many. He was a great philanthropist who impacted many. We shall hear about that and finally also gain some insights into his spiritual influence on the Catholic Church and the communities he served. Each panelist will respond to questions from the moderator around his or her topic in 3 minutes, but altogether not exceeding 10 minutes. When all this is done, we shall have an open forum for members of the audience to ask questions, share memorable quotes, personal stories, tributes, wisdom, and philosophies that we shared with the Cardinal. Hopefully, this will enable us to know a little bit more about the Cardinal and gives us an opportunity to learn about the spirituality and the impact he made on the lives of the many people he touched. Now, if for any reason any of the panelists has other things, if the time becomes a little bit too short for any of the panelists, whatever that is left from the time allocated will be accommodated in the time when we have for the open forum. So please do not worry too much if you are told that your time is up. You can always come back during the open forum and add whatever that you do. Now, I pray that our meeting this evening of remembering and sharing lessons and legacies of the servant of God, Cardinal Peter Dery, Emeritus Archbishop of Tamale, will uplift our spirits, help to share in the values they exemplify, and encourage the living of our lives in his honor and memory. Now, to go straight to the panelists, we shall invite first Father Becci, then Mrs. Kumson will follow, and Mrs. Domachere, and then John will also come. And we will do 3 rounds of questions, and we're saying that at the end of each round, we will then return to the first person and ask more questions. When all that is done, as I said, we will have an opportunity to ask questions and share other things. Now, to come to you without wasting any more time, Father, we will start with you. Can you give a brief biography of the servant of God to help us know him better? And you are using 3 minutes for this, please. Hello, Father.
Father who? It seems Father has muted himself.
He's talking about Father Paul Becher.
Beche, yes.
Yeah, Father Paul Becher.
Has he muted himself?
It looks like he's not on it though.
I don't see him now on the list. It looks like he's dropped
Absolutely.
or
On the
changed
list
his
he's not on it.
All right. All right. Shall we go to Mrs. Kumson now and ask the question? Mrs. Kumson.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. The question is coming up. Mrs. Kumson, how did the servant of God inspire you as a woman to shape your life to be who you are today?
Good evening to all. I met Cardinal Dery when I became an active International Movement of Catholic Students, IMC Expas Romana member of the University of Cape Coast. As the bishop in charge of the youth apostolate, he graced our leadership courses, Easter study sessions, and Ghana National Catholic Youth Council Executive GANSEC meetings with his presence. He encouraged us to be very active Catholic youth on campus as well as in our parishes, as he had a strong belief in our potentials. He actively participated in our deliberations and encouraged ladies not only to be active members, but also to take up leadership roles. I became the Pax Romana president of my branch, and in my final year, when I heard of the search for the replacement of the then national coordinator, I offered to replace him. There was hesitation because all the 3 coordinators who preceded me were males. As such, it appeared to be a role for males. It involved traveling a lot, and means of transport was not guaranteed. One had to rely on state transport if you were lucky to get on. For certain areas, Watonchine or Trotro was the only means of transport available for visits to the various branches. Eventually, I was offered the role. A little administrative issue almost derailed my coordinatorship. That weekend, the annual General Executive Council meeting of GANSEC was held. Cardinal Dery was the guest speaker. When all the full-time youth workers were introduced, I happened to be the only lady full-timer and the first according to the Cardinal. He was so overjoyed. He gave me his blessings and encouraged me to be a role model for other ladies. The administrative issue died a natural death. As part of our programs, we had lady sessions where we discussed our challenges and the way forward. He was truly a gender advocate, as can be attested to by the interventions he made on behalf of women and girls through various projects. Two ladies I can mention who also became very active. One is Rosalind Batoku, or Rosalind Obingfori of blessed memory, who was a prominent advocate of women's issues on the national level, as well as the late Cynthia Kanu, who served the African Coordination Team in Nairobi from 1999 to 2002. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Is Father Bechi back? All right.
Not yet, moderator. I'm trying to help him by phone. He dropped off. Just go
Okay.
on.
If not, your ladyship, are you on?
Yes, I'm on.
All right, your ladyship, then how can you say that you have been a beneficiary of the great man's vision for women? And if you may add, did you ever meet him actually in person?
Yes, I would say that I have benefited tremendously from this great man who is the servant of God. If you will recall, towards the end of the second millennium, there was a worldwide outcry for the empowerment of the girl child and women. And in Ghana here, there was a jingle of send the girl child to school, send the girl child to school. I want to say that the servant of God had this vision more than half a century earlier, when he realized the importance of empowering women and girl children. And for that matter, he played a very leading and critical role in the founding of St. Francis of Assisi Girls Senior High School, as we call it now. And I am a beneficiary of that school. I say that the holistic education that I got from that school has served as a solid foundation for all that I have achieved in life. We were taught well. At the end of the O-levels, when I wrote the exams, I qualified for sixth form, and I entered St. Louis Senior High School in Kumasi. Even after leaving St. Francis Senior High School and in Kumasi, the name of the servant of God continued to be an inspiration for me and my other colleagues to study hard who came from St. Francis. I'll tell you how. At St. Louis, during midterms, it was the policy of the school that all the students should vacate the campus. And we were coming all the way from the Upper West region, and 4 days was not enough in the early 70s to go back to Wa and beyond and then come back. In any case, transport was very, very difficult. And even if we had the money, we would not be able to go and come back. The servant of God, then Bishop Peter Kwasi Sapong of Kumasi, took it upon himself that those of us who came from St. Francis of Assisi Girls Senior High School, he would come for us and send us to his outhouse at his residence. And he made it a point once a day to visit us. If he ever came and found us sleeping, he would tell us that he was going to tell Bishop Dery then that his children were not studying, that we were not serious in school. So anytime he mentioned that, then even if we wanted to sleep, we will all sleep with our books open. As soon as we heard footsteps, then we will get up and start reading. And say, oh, I have a good report for my brother Bishop Dery. On hindsight, I think that the servant of God might have told his brother Bishop Akwasi Sapon then that his children were in St. Louis and that he should take care of us. So that's the 4 days we studied like no man's business. Unfortunately, we qualified, we entered the university. I studied law, and with the discipline that I learned and the diligence that I was inculcated in me at St. Francis. I studied hard, I passed my exams, I got a scholarship from the University of Ghana to go and study for my master's in Harvard. So in brief, this is how I have benefited from the servant of God. Did I ever get the chance to meet him in person? As a little girl, I had yearned to meet him in person when he was first ordained Bishop of the Denwa Diocese, but I never got the chance. But decades later, he himself called me to him. I'll tell you how. As a little girl in the elementary school staying at Nadoli, which was then under the Dafiama parish, anytime the bishop was coming to say mass at Dafiama, me and a group of my colleagues would walk on foot 9 miles to go to Dafiama to attend the mass, simply because the bishop was coming. And anytime he entered the church and he was holding his bishop's staff, I felt the presence of God, and I said, this man was the true servant of God. And then I wrote the common entrance and I chose St. Francis Girls Senior High School because I learned that he was the founder of that school. So it was my idea that choosing that school, I will get the chance to meet him because I expected him to come there from time to time. When I went there throughout the 5 years, he would come on official occasions, but obviously we didn't get the chance to meet him one-on-one. But I had a great hope because for every Form 5 batch of students, after writing the exams, before you leave the school, he would come to the school and hold one-on-one exit interviews with all of us. So I knew that one day my time will come. Unfortunately, to my chagrin, when it was our time in 1972, the servant of God did not come to grant us the exit interview, and I was so disappointed. But going forward, after more than 2 decades, I met the servant of God on a flight and I went to greet him. So he asked me how I was doing and I told him a few things. And then when I was going, he happened to have been going for a medical review and he was accompanied by a medical doctor whom I knew in school. But this medical doctor did not recognize me. So as I was going, the medical doctor asked the servant of God, where do you know this woman? So he called me back by name. And he asked him, I said, you don't know Angelina Mona, now Mrs. Domachare, who went to St. Francis, she went to St. Louis, she went to Legon, she went to Harvard, now she's working as so and so, and she's even now deputy. In fact, he narrated all this. I've never met him one-on-one. So the doctor just bowed down. He said, I said, oh, Angelina, forgive me because we have been with it. And this is how and then the final thing that really brought peace when he became cardinal and he came home from Rome. Of us were
All right, can we stop here now? And so we will stop here now and catch up with you again. All right. Now we go to John. John, how did the servant of God's spiritual and religious beliefs influence his daily life and interactions with others?
Sorry, you're using 2 devices, so we're getting double feedback. So the recording may not help. If you can mute one of the devices, thank you.
All right. Okay.
I was saying that when I met him as a cardinal and I greeted him, he again mentioned me my name and asked me how I was doing and where I've been. In fact, I was so overwhelmed I couldn't answer. Then he said, oh, I know that you are doing well. Then he blessed me and he stretched out his hands and shook hands with me. I have forever cherished that handshake with the cardinal. And to me, it gives me a great pleasure that I was able to attend his funeral at Tamale and then pay him my last respects. So this is what I have to say
All right, thank you.
Regard to the questions that you just posed to me.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. John, how did the servant of God's spiritual and religious beliefs influence his daily life and interactions with others?
Well, good evening to our listeners and viewers. I will say that as Christians, the call to holiness has everything to do with lifestyle. A lifestyle that is lived basically within the context of the Beatitudes and mindful of the criteria of the final judgments. As Jesus taught us in Matthew 25, whatsoever you do to the least of my brothers, you do to me. Such lifestyle must directly translate into love of God and love of neighbor. This is what the servant of God believed in. He was a man of prayer whose faith in God was very deep. He served God with all his heart. His faith in God and holiness drove his spectacular charity works. He led a selfless life. His focus was on serving others, irrespective of their origins. From the north to south, east to west, he touched lives. He was motivated by his ability to make space for people, especially the needy, the marginalized, the vulnerable, and many others. Freeing the human person from all forms of dependency through the lens of Christian faith meant so much to him. He laid emphasis on human values as key to human freedom. Human values such as love, forgiveness, respectfulness, empathy, unity, freedom, and humility. Concerning his spirituality, I would say, permit me to share one experience that I had with him. I started encountering the servant of God from 1980 when I became the National Secretary of IMCX Pax Romana. So for 28 years, the servant of God was my spiritual father. Throughout these years, I came to believe that the servant of God was driven by the personal conviction that he was guided by divine providence, and therefore he could know the will of God more by intuition than thinking. I dare say that he could easily predict outcomes without knowing how he came by them. And let me just give one testimony. In 1995, November, and please listen to this very well. My nuclear family of 6 was in Tamale over a weekend for the renewal of marriage vows, 10 years into marriage. Servant of God had been taken ill and was recuperating at St. Victor's Major Seminary. He had earlier agreed on our visit and did not want to disappoint us. So he asked us to join him at the seminary. The celebration went well as planned. The moment of departure came, and as is expected, the servant of God prayed with us and we received the parting blessing. Soon after taking off in our Hyundai Excel saloon car, just about 20 meters away, he beckoned us to reverse. He walked to meet us halfway, and standing by the car, he then slowly remarked, "John, your tires." I knew very well that my vehicle tires were pretty new. He entered his room while we waited in the car and came back with a bottle of holy water. He went around the car, sprinkling the holy water, prayed again, and asked us to leave. He kept waving and gazing at us till we could see him no more. We had an accident as we approached Nkinkesu on the way to Kumasi. It was raining heavily, and while we were negotiating a slopey curve, we suddenly bumped into a pothole big enough to contain the entire vehicle. The entire pothole in that curve had been covered by running water, that it was difficult to identify it. All the 4 tires of our car burst, and steering was difficult to control. The vehicle veered into the other lane, which had a deep valley by its side, and we knew we were going to land in that valley when a minibus full of passengers suddenly appeared from the opposite direction. Indeed, it was my prayer that we collide with the bus rather than land in the valley. It happened, but instead of a head-on collision, our car glided on the side of the minibus and we got deflected back into the right lane till our car stopped on its own. For about 3 minutes, the entire family kept cool inside the car without talking. It was as if we were all silently thanking God for what had happened. Meanwhile, the enraged passengers from the minibus rushed to our car, ostensibly to ask why I drove so carelessly. And when they saw that it was an entire family in the car, they rather began to thank God for saving our lives. The driver of the minibus told us that he had the option to move to the opposite lane when he saw us coming towards him. But according to him, he heard a thin voice telling him to continue in his lane. He then asked us what church we attend. And when we responded that we belong to the Catholic Church, he remarked, "Your God has saved you." I should tell you something. He had been sent to block us from running into the deep valley. 2 days later, my wife called the servant of God with the intention to thank him for the weekend. He intentionally did not want to mention the accident, as she thought the old man was recuperating. But this was not to be. The servant of God, in his response, told my wife that we had a terrible accident on the way. And my wife silently thought someone has informed him about it. But this was what he told my wife. "I know, I saw it. That is why I had to call you back when you took off." What can we say about this encounter? This is what makes me think that the servant of God was driven by that personal conviction that he was guided by divine providence. He could know the will of God by intuition. He had deep faith in God, and his spirituality touched lives. This I find very amazing, and I have been touched by his life, drawing so much inspiration from him. There are outcomes that I did not have the opportunity to share with the beatification team, but I strongly believe God will see the servant of God successfully sailing through the beatification process. He touched many lives. A number of those who encountered the servant of God have grown into productive individuals and are successful.
Brother Tando.
So many have emerged leaders in various spheres of life with inspirations from the servant of God, and we bless him and ask him to intercede for us in all our endeavors. Eddie?
Yeah, you'll have some more opportunities. So
thank you.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. Father Betty, you are back.
I'm back, yes. Thank God.
So can we start with you again? Fill us in on the biography of the old man to help us know him better.
So good evening to your viewers. It is a pleasure to be able to share something briefly about the biography of the servant of God, Peter Cardinal Dery. There's so much that can be said, but I will try to be as brief as there is not too much time. Peter Cardinal Dery was born on May 10, 1918 in a small village, Zimopare, in the Nandom traditional area in the Upper West region. His parents, Theodore Korekun and Agnes Zore, these were peasant farmers. So the young Dery grew up knowing how to take care of the animals, knowing how to assist his parents on the farm. So he was a little rural boy who grew up in an environment where school going was not something that was contemplated at the time. There was no school at the time, so his life was lived within the context of the rural village. So, but he was particularly close to his uncle, who was called Mankuruna, and he lived his life close to this man who was a fetish priest. And this man was well renowned in the then northwestern part of the Gold Coast and into Upper Volta at the time. And Dery assisted him to make the sacrifices that people came to have or to request the man to offer for them. But his life totally changed when his father encountered the missionaries in Jirapa. The missionaries had come to Jirapa in 1929, and his father had gone gotten in contact with them, and he was excited about joining the missionaries. So there was a family dispute between him and his brother, Makruna, but eventually grace prevailed, and Dery was taken by his father to Jirapa to the missionaries. So when he was in Jirapa, he was enrolled together with his father into the catechumenate to be prepared for baptism. And he showed very great brilliance in learning the catechism, so much so that the fathers liked him quite a lot. So in 1932, the very first people in the whole of this area to be baptized were 12, and he was one of the 12. He was a young boy, the others were adults, so he joined that group and he was baptized. And soon after his baptism, because of his brilliance, the fathers took a liking to him and eventually had him as their house boy. So he was a houseboy to the father, serving them as they needed his assistance. And they sent him to the catechism school to train. First of all, his father had intended that he should be a catechist. But at that time, there was no school in the whole of this area. So the catechism school was a kind of a back door to formal education. So young Dery was enrolled in the catechism school, and because of his exceptional brilliance, he was sent by the missionaries to Navrongo to begin his elementary education. So he did his elementary, secondary, and training college education in Navrongo, graduating in 1941 as a trained teacher. It was soon after he became a teacher that he felt called to the priesthood. So he made that known to the fathers, and eventually he was enrolled in the St. Teresa's Major Seminary in Amisano near Cape Coast. Because at that time, there was only one major seminary in the whole of the Gold Coast, and it was in Amisano, St. Teresa's Major Seminary. So Dery was sent to Amisano to begin his priestly formation, philosophy and theology. It was in 1946 that the bishops of the then Northern Territories decided to open their own major seminary up in the north. So Dery, together with 6 others from the north, were asked to come back to Wiaga, where they intended to open the major seminary. And it was in Wiaga in 1946 that he was among the first batch to open the St. Victor's Major Seminary, which later on was moved to Tamale, where it is now. So he continued with the seminary formation in Wiaga and successfully completed in February 1951. He was ordained a priest by Bishop Gerard Bertrand in Nandom in 1951 as priest. He was the first priest of this whole area. After that, he served in 3 parishes, Nandom, Ko, and Kaleo. In Kaleo, he was the very first African parish priest ever to serve in that parish, and in fact, in the whole area. Soon after that, he was sent for studies in social studies in Nova Scotia, Canada, to the St. Francis Xavier University in Antigonish in Canada, and that is where he did his studies in social sciences. And I think that prepared him in a special way for all the services that he rendered society through his advancements and promotion of the human person through social works. After his studies in Canada, he was asked to go to Lumen Vitae Institute in Brussels, in Belgium, to do religious education, which he did. And the intention was that he would come home and eventually take charge of the religious education programs in the Diocese of Tamale at the time. But as soon as he finished, Wa Diocese was created in 1959, and he was elected the very first bishop of Wa. Pope John the 23rd invited him to Rome, where he was ordained. So he was ordained in Rome by Pope John the 23rd, and this was on May 8, 1960. And when he was ordained, Shortly after he returned to the diocese, he made requests to the Pope to allow him to introduce the xylophone and local instruments into the liturgy, and at the same time to compose songs in the local language so that the people could pray using their own language. And this was long before the Second Vatican Council, when enculturation was not even contemplated. So he already started enculturation in the Diocese of Wa by introducing local instruments and local music into the liturgy. And he himself composed quite a number of songs and the order of the Mass, which currently we still use in the liturgy. After 15 years of fruitful pastoral ministry in to Tamale, this was in 1975, and he was made the Bishop of Tamale. Later on, he was elevated as the very first Archbishop of Tamale. This was on May 30th, 1977. And he served the Archdiocese of Tamale until he retired. And as luck would have it, his ministry and his life was well recognized by the Roman authorities. Hence, at the age of 88, in 2006, Pope Benedict XVI, though he was retired, elevated him to the rank of cardinal. He was the
All right,
Father,
do you want to stop there? Because
closed
you will have another opportunity to add to it, to this.
Right. Right.
I think it's a good place to stop.
Yes, because I was to end with his death. So I think
Yes,
being a cardinal, that was a great grace to the whole Church of God.
Yes, okay. So you have another opportunity to go.
Okay.
Now,
right.
Mrs. Compton, let me come back to you again. How does the servant of God's message or mission resonate with the contemporary issues of challenges in society?
Okay. As the bishop in charge of the youth, the servant of God understood us. He always pleaded with his fellow bishops on our behalf to allow us to grow. They just did not understand us. They thought we were too radical. Yes, there were times we went overboard. One instance is when CAGA, which is a Catholic Graduates for Action, that was the Kumasi branch of ICMICA, that's the graduates group of International Movement of Catholic Students. We are Catholic professionals. Joined a group that was not Catholic, that was more socialist oriented, to sign a communique. And at that time, the Rawlings administration was contemplating going to the IMF, and the Catholic bishops had encouraged them to go ahead. And we and the socialists felt that they could manage with more work and hard work. We could manage, and it was a communique. So we had openly come out to disagree with our bishops, and we were seen as opposing the bishops. Cardinal advised us, a man of God advised us that there were times you had to use diplomacy. In our youthful and exuberance, we just went ahead and did what we felt we should do. But after talking to us, and he had a way of talking to us for us to understand that, yes, we could have done it another way. And it's like the situation in which we find ourselves now. We tried not to go to the IMF, but we are there. The second example I'll give is at our 1981 Easter study session. After our deliberations and on our displeasure at the level at which Kalabule had risen in the nation, we IMCS, International Movement of Catholic Students, all agreed that we'll go on a nationwide protest march to express our displeasure at the way things were going. So I belong to the Cape Coast branch. So eventually, they sort of tried to prevent us from going on the demonstration, but we had to come to a compromise. Eventually, a couple of us went to the regional minister's office. At that time, it was the late Cancam da Costa, and presented our resolution to him. So yes, as youth, sometimes we overreact, but he being on our side and explaining things to us and advising us. And on hindsight, as at my age now, there are certain things I would have done differently. So I'll end here.
Hey, sir,
You are muted. You are muted, please.
Your Ladyship, can you share a memorable quote from the servant of God that reveals who he is as a person?
Yes, I'll do so. The servant of God as a person, he stood for the holistic development of the human being in terms of mind, body, and soul. And he approached all of them with the same zeal, the same dedication, and the same diligence. So I will share with you what he said in his memoirs about his philosophy of life. So the first one, which you can find at pages 90 to 91 of let me share an earlier one. The earlier one, the first one is at page 88 of his memoir, and quote, he says, if the gospel is to be really good news for the people, it must help them better their lot materially and economically. They must feel the power of the gospel in the healthier and better lives it engenders for them. Following the principle that grace builds on nature, it is my conviction that the people should experience the force of the gospel in their material and sociocultural life. In this way, they will be more disposed to open themselves spiritually to the word of God. I therefore saw my ministry as a calling to help my people fulfill themselves holistically. It was my conviction that in our presentation of the gospel to the people, we must empower them to be able to take care of their various needs as humans. After all, God communicates himself to human beings, and his wish for all is for them to live the fullness of life as human beings. Then there's another one at pages 90 to 91 of his memoirs. He says, quote, it is a truism that everyone has a God-given vocation for life. I also saw as my task the need to help every individual realize that God-given vocation of his or hers. As soon as I notice that the person has a tendency to a particular calling in life, I use all the human, material, and spiritual resources available to me to help the person realize himself or herself in line with his or her vocation. It is in line with this vision of mine that I saw the need to create the enabling environment for people to develop themselves in a variety of ways by opening different types of schools. I saw the need to open secondary schools for boys and girls, technical schools for those boys who had a more practical aptitude, and the vocational schools for the girls as well. He also had a, a vision for women, as I mentioned earlier on. And he believed in strong Christian families. So he was of the view that in order to get strong Christian families, the women must be empowered. And he also mentioned that at a point in his memoirs, which I didn't take note of the page, but this is the short quotations that I can give from his own memoir, his own writing, his own thoughts, to show that he was for the holistic development of the human being. And through this, he was able to sponsor a lot of brilliant boys and girls to study abroad in tertiary institutions in all spheres of life. So this is what I will say briefly.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Mr. John Tando, what can we learn from the servant of God's example to apply in our own lives, regardless of our spiritual or religious beliefs?
I will simply say love of God and love of neighbor. The servant of God had a great charism for attracting people. If you even look at the quotes that we've just listened to, you could see that making space for people, helping people to develop was his concern, something of major concern to him. Our spiritual lives must be lived practically for the common good. And so, irrespective of our religious or spiritual beliefs, we must live to appreciate and respect the dignity of the human person. A human being is worthy of God's love, and we need to prioritize those who are in most need of our solidarity. It is because the common good, which is the good of society as a whole, requires it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Father Beche, do you want to continue from where you left off? Because my question to you now is something that you covered a little bit in your earlier speech. So I'll give you freedom to go on from where you left off.
Right. Well, I was actually concluding his biography, but I was asked to say something about his vocation story. So I don't know whether I can just say that now.
Yes, go ahead.
Right. So as it has been expressed, the servant of God was somebody who was a very religious person. And his religiosity was anchored particularly in his particular way of life that he chose. He chose to become a priest, a servant of God. So I'll just say briefly about something about what I've read in his memoirs about how he himself saw how he became a priest. In the first place, if you ask many priests or religious how they came to decide to become priests or religious, they will tell you that many factors play a role. It's not just one single factor. Therefore, in his own vocation story, several factors played a role. A number of them are these. One of them was, or which I consider as a major factor, was his close association with the missionaries in Jirapa when he was a young boy. And one of the things that brought him very close to the fathers was the way the fathers lived. And he saw this very closely from serving them as a houseboy. He had one particular duty or responsibility that was assigned to him, and that was what he called a punka boy. Now, the punka was an improvised fan. These days we have air conditions and we have motorized fans. But the fathers at that time didn't have this luxury. So they improvised a ceiling fan, which was made out of a cardboard and which was suspended above the dining table of the fathers. A long rope was attached to this punka, and Dery, as a young boy, was given the responsibility of pulling this fan to and fro He would sit in a corner and pull the punka to and fro. And the swinging of the punka generated fresh air, and it cooled the white fathers as they ate. Definitely, he was very close to them. He was sitting there, he was seeing them, and he was observing them, and he must have admired these white men. He being close to them, seeing how they ate, how they laughed, and how they lived. And he was usually rewarded with the leftover food. When the food remained, that was his lot. So imagine an illiterate village boy being close to these white men and eating their food. That must have left some impression upon him. And gradually, the seeds of vocations are sown in various and diverse ways. So this close association with the fathers must have made a deep impression upon him. In fact, he later on became a bishop over some of these very fathers he was serving as a Ponca boy. And that is what I call a miracle of grace. Another factor was the way he saw the junior seminarians dressed. In those days, they wore khaki during the week, and on Sundays they wore white. And he said he just admired these seminarians. He saw that these were very special young boys. And when he got to know that they were seminarians, then he felt, how could I also be one of them? Is it not possible? And of course, in a certain sense, his idea of becoming one of them eventually materialized when he was enrolled in the junior seminary, that was Immaculate Conception Seminary in Navrongo, where he was better prepared because junior seminarians are kind of guided to choose the priestly vocation. Of course, not all junior seminarians end up becoming priests, but in the junior seminary, the seeds of the vocation are more neatly nurtured. So in the junior seminary in Navrongo, he must have been exposed more to the life of the priest. And one thing that is very special in the junior seminary is that each one had a spiritual guide. I myself attended the St. Francis Xavier Minor Seminary, and I know we're given spiritual guides. And these guided you and showed you what you could do with your life. And if you express the desire to become a priest, then they guided you all the more. If you didn't indicate that you wanted to be a priest, then they will guide you along the path that you thought God was directing you towards. Therefore, his seminary formation, that is a junior seminary formation, helped him and helped in the maturation of his vocation towards the priesthood. No wonder that when he completed in 1941, his natural option was to continue to become a priest. Actually, his father had intended that after his catechism in Jirapa, he should go back to Zimopare to become a catechist. So this idea of his father did not materialize in him becoming a catechist, but it was transformed into his desire eventually to become a priest. So he eventually lived the desire of his father, and he lived it in the fact that he became a priest. So these are some of the factors which I gleaned from his memoir, which kind of helped him to decide to become a priest. One may say they are banal, that is sitting down and watching the white fathers eat and watching how seminarians are dressed. But then God usually refines a person's original intention and guides him. And gradually he was guided to opt to become a priest. And that is why later on he opted to go to the seminary. And as I've recounted already, he went to Amisano, and later on he came back to Wiaga, ended up by being ordained the first Catholic priest in the entire Upper West on the 11th of February, 1951. So briefly, this is what I can say about his vocation story.
Thank you very much, Father. Now, Mrs. Kumson, in what ways did the servant of God demonstrate compassion, kindness, or service towards others, if you remember any? Would you please share with us?
Okay. I'll start by saying others have said it, but I guess it's good to repeat it. Cardinal Dery, the man of God, humble, modest, accessible, jovial, and related with all, irrespective of age, gender, or status. Came down to the level of his sheep. And once you met him, he definitely will remember your name. He will call you by name next time. To the servant of God, all of us were God's children, and all of us are equal. His relationship with his driver, Dominic, spoke volumes, to the extent that till date, some of us, long after Cardinal is gone, are still in touch with Dominic. He took personal interest in the youth he nurtured, to the extent that he got involved in their careers. Where they had challenges, he offered help, be it by way of facilitating scholarships or helping financially. Yes, he truly cared. It was a joy and pride for him to officiate at weddings of the youth he had nurtured and to baptize his grandchildren. An aspect of our faith I was not aware of was that expecting couples could be blessed for a safe term of pregnancy and safe delivery. This he did at one of our meetings in Kumasi. At the mass, we were at tech, so there were Mr. and Mrs. Bruhamon, and Abba was heavily pregnant. So he called them to the altar to bless them. And he explained to us that there's a lot in our Catholic faith we have to look out for. And we needed to explore. And that we don't need to go elsewhere for prayers. We have it all in the church. So we have to. And I guess the church should also demonstrate some of these things so that we also become aware, so that we don't go wandering around looking for what we have in abundance in our own church. In his living room, he had a corner he referred to as a shrine, where pictures of Derimba, their families, etc., were on display. And he enjoyed seeing that. It's even more joyous when you visit him. I happened to have the opportunity to take my boys to visit him, and he was very happy to have us. We would query, as the youth, we would query the servant of God and other bishops about the four-wheel drives they were using. Before he drove the four-wheel drive, he had a VW Beetle. He used to travel all over the country for youth programs. He then graduated to a 120Y Datsun and then to a four-wheel drive. Naive as we were, we thought it was flashy and expensive. He patiently explained that for the number of trips he has to make and the sort of roads we had, he had no choice but to accept a vehicle which would help him arrive at his destination in one piece than in pieces. When the new bishop's house was done, man of God refused to move in. He preferred his old place. Some of us, would have jumped. That house is now the Archdiocesan Youth Center. As such, when he was celebrating his jubilee, some Derimbas quickly organized and gave his place a facelift so that for the celebration, he also had